The weather guys called it a significant rain event, which honestly is like calling a charging rhino a moody mammal with a head cold. No, this wasn't rain. This was a biblical grudge match between the sky and my roof. And those drops were coming down like marbles, pelting my garage windows so hard it sounded like a tiny army of drummers was staging a coup. But I was calm, you know? There in my garage, surrounded by solder fumes and half-finished projects, I had my ace in the hole, my portable power substation. The Beast. She was the size of a smart car, gray metal, bristling with cables thick enough to anchor a ship, humming with a kind of energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. My pride and joy, my insurance against chaos. Just as I was admiring her, my phone buzzed with another emergency alert flash flood warning, seek higher ground. I almost laughed. I'd built my own higher ground, thank you very much. You might be wondering who in their right mind owns something that could power a music festival. Simple. A guy who knows what's coming. I'm Alex Peterson, an electrical engineer. I consult on keeping cities from going dark, but my obsession with backup power didn't start at work. 4 years back, on a sunny September afternoon, a suicidal squirrel took out the transformer at the end of my street. 3 days, 3 in the dark, and right when I was about to clinch my fantasy football league. My brother-in-law still gloats about that. That was the moment I swore never again. So I built the beast, a 20-kilowatt diesel monster, soundproofed, feeding a fortress of batteries and inverters. Yeah, it was overkill. But if you've ever lost to a smug relative because of a rodent, you know where I'm coming from. My real point of pride, though, was running in the basement a flood system with 3 industrial pumps each could drain a pool in minutes. Armored cables, triple redundancy, all of it hooked to its own high amperage circuit, my shield against the apocalypse, or at least against everything the weather in the neighborhood could throw at me. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was in the form of Karen von Stroheim, president of the Harmony Creek HOA clipboard, fused to her hand, scanning the streets for even a whiff of non-compliance. You know the type, houses all beige lawns measured with a ruler, individuality, as welcome as a raccoon in a pantry. Our first run-in was 3 months ago, right after I finished installing my new discharge pipe. It was painted to match the house, tucked behind a bush, totally invisible unless you were spying from orbit. An hour later, knock knock. Karen at my door, eyes like a disappointed librarian. Mr. Peterson, you're in violation. Your sump pump pipe isn't approved. I said, Karen, it's a pipe. It drains water. If we flood, nobody's going to care what color it is. She scowled, cited a bylaw about aesthetic harmony. I told her if the water got in my basement, would look like a shipwreck. That apparently was a declaration of war. After that, the laminated warnings came rolling in. One said my pipe was a tripping hazard for what the garden gnomes. Another claimed intermittent, unapproved hydraulic acoustics. I started using them as coasters. But tonight, the real drama started. The rain was coming down like Judgment Day. My phone buzzed again, this time Dave from next door, on the edge of a meltdown. Alex, my window wells are full. Sir Reginald's underwater. Sir Reginald, for the record, is a gnome. I sipped my coffee, told Dave to relax. My pumps were running fine. We'd be okay. And then suddenly silence. Not a total blackout, just silence. My monitors were dead, the pumps were off, but the house had power. Blood ran cold. Something was wrong. I ran to the basement, water rising fast. Flipped the breaker for the pumps, nothing. Then it hit me. No way she wouldn't, would she? I grabbed my raincoat, bolted into the storm, followed my armored conduit out to the HOA's utility box. Sure enough, the door was ajar. My dedicated pump breaker was off. Worse, a bright orange padlock with Harmony Creek HOA stamped on it was holding it there. There was even a laminated notice, final violation, power cut, until I paid fines and removed the pipe. Signed by Karen herself. At first I was just in awe, the pettiness, the gall. She'd marched out into a flood to cut off my flood protection. But then I looked at my house, my memories in the basement, and I looked at the beast sitting in the garage. That's when I grinned. She'd brought a laminated notice to a flood fight, and now it was on. I hitched the beast to my truck, rolled her out into the driveway with all the drama of a thunderstorm, work lights slicing through the rain. Dave stuck his head out, clutching a throw pillow like a life vest, eyes wide. Alex, what is that thing? I grinned. This was my moment. I fired up. The beast spooled out a massive power cable, plugged it into my manual override, and flipped the kind of Frankenstein switch you dream about as a kid. In the basement, the pumps kicked on with a roar that drowned out the storm. A geyser of water shot from my discharge pipe like a jet engine, and I stood there in the rain, hands on my hips, feeling like a superhero in a movie trailer. It wasn't 2 minutes before Karen showed up, a yellow raincoat glowing in the gloom, umbrella nearly ripped from her hand. "Peterson, you can't do this. It's a violation, noise parking everything." I leaned against the truck, cool as ice. "Karen, it's my driveway, my generator, my property. I'm off your grid just like you asked." She sputtered, tried to call the cops. 10 minutes later, Officer Miller arrived, face carved from stone, already tired of our nonsense. Karen poured out her complaint: industrial equipment, illegal pumps, blah blah. I countered. "She trespassed, killed my power, endangered my house during a state emergency. This is legal, it's safe, and it's the only thing stopping my basement from flooding." Miller looked at my generator, the neat wiring, the grounded copper rod. He looked at Karen. "Ma'am, did you cut his power?" She deflected. He sighed. "Looks like a civil issue. I'm not shutting down the only thing working. You two work it out." And with that, Karen's last weapon fizzled. But as the storm raged, new problems rolled in. Dave's hardware store pump died. Mr. Henderson from down the block showed up in pajamas begging for help. Mrs. Garcia from across the street was about to lose her playroom. Suddenly, my driveway was a mission control center, extension cords everywhere, the beast doling out power like Halloween candy. Dave became my dispatcher, fielding desperate requests, and for the next 2 hours, I was the reluctant folk hero of Harmony Creek, saving basements while Karen fumed behind her curtains. Dawn broke. The storm faded, and my side of the street stood dry while the rest of the block looked like a disaster zone. Karen's precious flower bed gone, washed away by the very water she tried to stop me from draining. Word spread that her own basement took on over a foot of water. Her standard pump couldn't keep up. Poetic justice, you know what I mean. Later that morning, Gus and Rico, my electrical contractors, rolled up. Gus took one look and laughed. "Alex, you started your own nation here." I said, "No, just planning the next phase. Permanent independence from HOA meddling." We sketched out a plan for a new city-permitted, tamper-proof utility line. My house would be its own island, immune to anyone with a grudge and a padlock. As we huddled over blueprints, Karen showed up, clutching a new notice, ready for round 2, until Gus cheerfully showed her our fast-tracked city permit and warned her that tampering now would bring the city's wrath, not just mine. The color drained from her face. She looked around, neighbors peeking from windows, the HOA queen now utterly powerless. She dropped her paper in the mud and sloshed home, defeated. The sun set on a neighborhood that, for one crazy night, had its own power grid and learned a thing or two about what really matters when things get tough. That night, I sat on my tailgate with a cold beer, surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends. Dave toasted the Harmony Creek microgrid. Gus raised his bottle to soggy lawns for our enemies. I toasted spite, the most underrated of all renewable energy sources. A week later, Karen resigned for personal reasons. No one was surprised. And that, folks, is how I became the local legend, the guy who stared down the HOA dragon with nothing but a generator, a grudge, and a refusal to lose to either a squirrel or a laminated notice. I guess in the end, the real property value isn't in the bylaws, it's knowing when to stand up for your neighbors and how to keep the lights on when it matters. But hey, you tell me, was I right to go nuclear? Or did I just add fuel to the suburban fire? Drop your thoughts below, because in the suburbs, there's always another storm brewing.